I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any luck? Let's move to roll call then.
Yeah. Okay, Pitmer has.
Here. But
Okay, all right. Joe Roca. Okay, Spencer Scott.
here.
Hey, Betsy Van Dyke.
Here.
Cynthia Strecker. Here. Mike Nichols,
Present.
Vicky Lewis.
Here.
Lonnie Lazar,
Present.
and Ty Hilton.
Here.
On Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. First, thing we'll do now is the approval of the agenda. Everyone, I hope, has read. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's everyone. So now, if anyone on the council has a conflict with any of the items on the agenda,
Tracy can make an announcement about the Spanish.
okay, we'll get that in afterwards. If anyone has a conflict with anyone that's on the agenda, now it's time to voice that issue. Can I not have anyone? Okay, we're gonna go back, we're gonna go to Tracy, who's gonna make an announcement.
Bienvenido. Si necesitas interpretación en español, por favor, clic en el icono del globo.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move to the consent agenda, and it's the February 8th minutes. And there are a couple of typos on the minutes that, Debbie will go over. Why don't you go through what those are?
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for pointing these out, and I've made the changes on, number 2, approval of the agenda. It says motion failed because I didn't fill in the right, boxes, so I changed that to 9 in favor, 0 opposed. And then also I left Joe's name off of the formation of the land use info, and so I added that on. Are there any other changes?
Anyone have any other changes to minutes? Okay, does someone move to approve the minutes? All in favor? Okay, we have two other items in the consent agenda. One is a letter of support to Congressman Huffman regarding the Lower Russian River Sanitation District Community Project. I hope you all have had a chance to read that, and I do thank Mike for pointing out some questions, some good questions that he specifically had to get in, had that letter fully signed or fully documented.
I'm sorry, could I just ask, you all to just speak up a little bit, the interpreter, so you guys are a little bit more.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And the other item is the letter of commendation to Redcom for exemplary service during the storm event on Sunday, February 4th. They were awesome. I hope no one has an issue with that, but if you do, you can say that now. So can I get a motion to approve B and C from the consent agenda?
I need to make some comments
Okay.
on B.
Okay,
And it might be appropriate to pull it from the consent agenda because it's more than one comment.
okay, we can do that. That's fine. So let's letter of commendation to Redcom.
I support that. I move that.
Yeah, I said that.
All right, so they were awesome. Everyone, okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to do that now?
Sure, that'll be fine. I've had several ratepayers from the sanitation district contact me, and they had several questions regarding the letter. They wanted to know, one, will the proposed work, the wet weather treatment plant capacity upgrade for which the RRCSD is seeking the federal community projects funding, eliminate future spills of this nature during high river flow periods? We have, the water agency on board.
They are.
We
they
do,
are.
so we have, and here Kent is coming online.
Great, thank you.
We can hear you, Kent, but we don't have a screen, so they don't see you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll get rid of my camera then. You don't need to see that mug. Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for entertaining this item on your agenda. As to the question whether this project that we're looking for support will eliminate actually, I'm going to ask you, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure I understood your question correctly.
Sure. Well, the proposed work of the weather treatment plant capacity upgrades basically eliminate future spills of this nature during the high river flow periods.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we did recently encounter a spill at the plant of some secondary treated water. It was a spill that resulted from a very specific piece of equipment failure that wasn't operating the way it was designed to operate. The wet weather treatment plant capacity project that we're asking this letter of support for would not address that specific issue that led to that spill. However, it is a investment that further builds it's an investment in the infrastructure that needs investment to build reliability into our system and help eliminate spills or failures of the system into the future. The system is aging, it does need investment, and seeking these grant funds will help achieve some of those improvements to our system.
Okay, the second question was, other high river flow periods earlier in the year didn't create spills. So further question is, what failed at the plant to create a March 1st, the March 1st issue?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, last year we did have quite a series of events, high river flow events that we didn't spill on. Whereas this year it was a lighter event. And that's because this year's spill was unrelated to high river flows. The spill was related to storm event. We lost some power out of the plant. It resulted in a piece of equipment not operating as it should with the power loss. So this year's event didn't happen because of high flows per se in the river. So the project, like I said in the previous response, isn't addressing that specific issue to that failed this year. So anyway, that's why last year was attributable to high flows in the river, and this year's failure was not. So sorry, let me just make sure I'm being clear on that. Last year, when we didn't have a spill, even though the river flows were higher, it's because it was different circumstances. We had lower river flows this year, but we had an equipment failure. So they're kind of two different issues.
Was the equipment failure due to power interruption?
Yeah, we believe there was a relationship there. The exact details of it's not entirely clear, but we lost a programmable logic controller on our filters. They lost power. When they lost power, that it closed some valves, which resulted in a backup in our system. So
I understand that. Then I'm curious, do you have backup generators?
We do. And normally the generators would kick on automatically. There seems to be some lack of clarity whether we lost power completely with a blackout or whether it was more brownout conditions. So I think there's some details there I don't think we're fully aware of at the moment. But it ultimately resulted in this PLC or programmable logic controller that lost power and ended up defaulting to closing these valves, and that has since been rectified so that particular nature incident doesn't occur again.
I'm familiar with the WTTP plant operation, so I ran an operation over in Hawaii, so I'm pretty familiar with what happens when you lose power. So my last question is, are there plans to install floating solar or backup batteries to minimize dependence on the grid? I'm thinking, the city of Windsor did that last year, and other cities in the state of California are doing that. Are we looking at grant opportunities to install floating solar at our facility here in the river?
Let me make sure I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit difficult time hearing. So did you say, are we pursuing floating solar opportunities as a backup power source.
And combined with backup batteries.
Yeah, the water agencies, to answer your question directly, no, we're not pursuing those two technologies, particularly at the Russian River Treatment Plant. However, the water agency is pursuing alternative forms of power generation, particularly renewable power generation. We have, in fact, in the past, looked at floating solar and done studies and feasibility evaluation, have since concluded that it wasn't a good fit for our circumstances. Although we know it's being used, Windsor's using floating solar at their facility. We have a generator at the treatment plant. It's not a renewable energy source, but as for backup power for the plant, we do have an automatic generator there that is intended to kick in and normally does. This year's event had an abnormality about it, but that we do have a backup power supply at the plant.
Redundancy is important, and it's something that is vital is that to our lower Russian River area. Might want to open this up for public discussion.
Well, I think that's the other question, right?
Well, I living 2 doors from the treatment plant. I do know that the backup generator goes on immediately when the power goes out, because I can hear it from my bed. And it's how I know the power's out tonight. And I realize that you may not know what happened since this happened on a Sunday. I remember being out walking my dog and seeing water agency trucks coming down the road, which don't usually happen on Sunday. So as far as I'm aware, the generator kicked on. There may have been some other problem between the generator and whatever needed the power. But I will tell you that the generator was on. But my question is, how come the community learned about this spill only through alternative news sources and social media, and not till a week or 2 after it happened? It would seem that this would be important information for the community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one thing affecting our timing of we notify the regional board immediately, and depending on the specific circumstances associated with a spill such as this, we do try to gauge what is appropriate means and timing of getting the message out there. Particularly, is there somebody at risk? Is there something at risk? In this case, it was secondary treated water. We did have biologists out on the site to assess the situation. So there's a lot of thought that goes into how urgent and timing of the message. The regional board is always notified straight away. I actually want to defer here a little bit to Emma. She's our operations manager, and maybe she has a little bit more to add on as to getting the public notice out there for this spill. Emma, did you catch the question?
I did. Thank you, Kent. Emma Walton, operations manager. I do want to first clarify the point around the generator. The generator did in fact kick on. It was when power was restored that something impacted how those PLCs were reset. So it actually wasn't the loss of power that impacted our plant. It was actually the power restoration. And it's something that we have never experienced before. So we definitely have some additional digging to do to further explore why that happened.
I know the letter of support that we're considering right now is about plant capacity upgrades and not necessarily spills or some of the other issues that you discussed. But I want to separate those things to some degree so we keep on track. But I do have one question that might bring together or further my notion that we should separate them, is that you're asking for funding for projects for upgrades to Huffman, and it sounds like you don't know some of the causes of some of the other issues that are at play right now. by asking for this chunk of money from the federal government now, does that preclude you or make it less likely if you have to go back for funding that you won't get all that you need, but you're just gonna get some of what you need? And so I'm asking that question because if we're gonna sign a letter of support to support this project, I think we'd wanna know that you're asking for as much as you actually need, or not just what you can get right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. Good question. We are always seeking grant funding. This is a relatively small ask as some of our grants go, not negligible by any means. But we robustly seek after grant funding to pursue these types of projects, to invest in the infrastructure. This is a $1.5 million ask. It's an congressional earmark request. We are working with the state on a much larger ask right now. We submitted a $40+ million ask for construction funding for different elements of the system as well. And the money we're asking for in this earmark request is, again, not specific to this spill or failure that occurred here. We don't see that there's a major project at this point to address that particular issue. So I guess to try to answer your question, I wouldn't expect that this request would adversely affect our ability to compete for other future requests. Like I said, we are constantly out there trying to find grant money to make these infrastructure investments. There's only so much that the ratepayer funds are able to afford. And so we have a good team of grant folks who are always looking for various grant opportunities. And so I don't think it compromises our ability in the future.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. So it seems safe that we can separate the two issues. So if there's any more council comments on the upgrade that's specifically talked about in the letter, does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, no?
I just would be curious what we're doing for $1.5 million. $1.5 million in this day and age doesn't buy you.
No, yeah, the project is very focused. It's really addressing a very specific issue during flood conditions. So not a very common time, but when floods occur on the river, the treatment plant can get inflows in there that are just beyond its capacity. And there are a few, I'll call them pinch points in the treatment process that we think that some very focused money can address. There's a couple of undersized pipelines in the plant that could be replaced or supplemented to get more capacity. There's some entrance conditions in our aeration basins that we think we can bring some efficiencies to. So it's very limited and focused, targeted funds for some specific fixes at the plant. So I agree. $1.9 million doesn't get you a long way, but we think these limited fixes we could accomplish much with it. Get a lot of bang for our buck for this one, I think.
Did anyone on Zoom or in the audience here have any questions or comments?
If you're joining on Zoom, if you're joining on Zoom and you have a comment, please raise your hand to speak. Not seeing any hands.
Anyone here? Okay. So can I get a motion to send this letter of
Send the letter to Congressman Hoffman.
second? Okay,
So it was Lonnie and Betsy.
and Betsy, I believe, yeah. Raise the hands. Aye, okay, and unanimous everyone. Okay, great, thank you. All right.
And thanks to the water agency folks for spending their time explaining this to us.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. And once again, thanks for Mike, because he brought a whole bunch of questions that we were able to answer, so that's great.
Thank you.
Any council member comment on matters not listed on the agenda? Anybody? No? Okay, public comments. So this is time for any public comments that you may have of items that are not listed on the agenda specifically. We ask you keep those comments to a minute or so. And just so you know, if you haven't been here before, we can't really respond to what you say, and we can't get into the discussion because it's not on the agenda, but it doesn't mean we're not listening to what you're saying.
Jeff, I'm sorry to do this, but I just have a brief comment.
Oh, sure.
I think it's important that we have a sign in the back of the America building saying that we've got an office in there. And I heard that was in phase 2. I don't know how long phase 2 might be, from experience of 50 decades. So I just want to encourage us to get a sign.
The order is in process.
That's
Great,
your best.
thank you.
Okay. All right.
I'm at leave right now, but I just wanted to say I'm really happy to see this many people here. It's amazing. It's like way more people than I've seen in the audience at the back meeting in so long. So yay. I'm ready.
Best,
Do I have to stand on the X?
Yes.
yeah.
It's attractive. Okay, I live in Forestville, and we have a proposed project that has the community at odds with each other. And it's a big topic for us. It's the proposal of Canyon Rock Quarry to establish an asphalt treatment plant. And one of their rationalizations is that they now travel their gravel to asphalt treatment plants. And that's two truck trips for each load. They would like to have the asphalt treatment plant in Forestville and to serve West County. Now, most quarries serve within a 20-mile radius of where the quarry is. That makes a lot of sense, but it is an asphalt plant. So at this point, we have people pro and con, and the con people are starting a lawsuit to stop it from happening. So we're trying to educate people in the community of what this means. And basically, we're going to wait for the draft environmental impact report, which is supposed to come out in late fall, maybe. And then after that, we have public comment period, and then we get the EIR. But people don't know what that is and aren't willing to wait for it. And so they're forming opinions now, and it's getting to be a very hot topic. So Vicki Miller over here interviewed Canyon Rock, and she did a very thorough interview of Canyon Rock. And now she's interviewing the group who's trying to, or will be suing Canyon Rock to stop this asphalt treatment plant. So all of that is occurring before the draft EIR even comes out. And so I'm hoping that the MAC can have a presentation by Permit Sonoma to explain the process of a draft EIR and an EIR ahead of the draft EIR coming out. So people actually know how much time they have to comment, are encouraged to read it, but really the bottom line is to explain what it covers. Because even when the draft EIR first came out and it had a list of all the things they're covering, people ignored it and just said, we're against the asphalt plant. So is there a way that the MAC can get involved in teaching people about a draft EIR and an EIR and the timing process? Can there be a presentation that the MAC can have to the community?
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question of?
Well, then it gets to be a discussion,
Okay.
so we're not really supposed to measure.
Okay,
All right,
all right.
thanks, Becca.
And Vicki Miller,
So-
does anybody want a copy of the first document that she's ready to do that, right? To people to have it?
Excuse me, it can't be published, but you can take a peek at it for sure.
Okay, so if anybody wants, I have a PDF, she has a PDF of it, and she's ready now for that, but it can't be published, so it can't be spread out yet, because she's gonna do the second interview and maybe even a third of another group of people. So, do you want it? We got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Is that your hand raised, or are you just saying kind of aspect?
High five.
Anyone else? Okay,
We have somebody online with their hand.
okay. I can't see you, so I apologize.
No problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm seeking the council to make a recommendation for the construction of speed limit radar signs and rumble strips in the neighborhood of the Hacienda neighborhood. I'm a resident here that lives on River Road, and I'd argue that there's an even bigger need for these signs than Rio Nido, because we have a popular beach, Mother's Beach, across the street, where the parking is often limited, and during.
And it's really hard to hear the guy on the owl if he's speaking back there. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, thank you. I heard that.
No worries. During summer months, it's quite busy, and there's a lot of residents that cross the street there. There's a school bus stop, there's a city bus stop, there's a store. I've seen many people cross in the center lane, which is a churn lane. And as long as I've lived here, I've experienced at least 3 accidents a year. And I know from living here that there are school-age students that walk along the sliver of the road there to reach the school bus stop. And so it's a really unsafe area. And so I'd just like some attention or some direction on what can be done, similar to that of Rio Nido. There's some speed limit signs, but I don't think it's enough in our neighborhood. So thanks for the chance to talk.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
The X, huh?
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Have you
Good.
been-
Yeah, it's just so people online can see and hear you. Well, they can hear you that way too.
Oh, okay, so anyway, my name is Charlene and I would like to, I live over here in the Sycamore Cottages. And anyway, there was a flood and what I want to do now is take the opportunity to thank everyone in District 5 for all the help that we received over here. You know, from Linda Hopkins to Shane to Jennifer in her workforce project and Lupe, and they really went out of their way to really help us in our needs, you know, in what I consider to be a disaster. Not everybody considered that, but I do. And so, yeah, they moved us, there was a lot of people involved that I think we didn't see, you know, other than, you know, the surface people touching in, and, you know, they did a lot, you know, they took us out of an environment that was unsafe and unhealthy, and took, I don't know, it was 7 trailers from here to there, and had to move cars, abandoned cars, and it was in the middle of the night, or when it took a few days, but yeah, it was in the middle of the night, and it was, you know, it was stormy and yucky, and but everybody got it done, and we, yeah, really went out on a limb to help people and gift cards, and it was just really, it was wonderful. And I think later, I think there's an opportunity to talk about something to talk about in the future. I think it's a future agenda thing, so I'll do that then. But yeah, I want to thank all the invisible people, and and then the food that they brought, the Salvation Army, and there were some other people too that I didn't, you know, that I don't remember the names, but I want to thank everybody in this invisible thing. They can see me or hear me.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'm Josh Rogers, president of the Russian River Youth nonprofit that we started. Just want to introduce myself. I'll probably be going to a lot more of these meetings, getting more enrolled into politics and how things are around here that I can learn from you guys, grants and stuff like that. Just to give you a little information, we're located right over there. We are a non-profit 501c3. We just signed a contract with the Boys and Girls Club with Guerneville, so we'll be taking kids Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays for classes. We'll be teaching weightlifting and some other activities. Just looking to get geared up for summertime. When the school's out, I'm gonna try to get that place open more often. Right now, we're currently just open Monday through Friday, 5 to 7. It's just me. So as soon as I do some background check learning about, we'll be getting more volunteers and hopefully open up by summer. So just want to introduce myself to you guys. So, all right, guys.
All right, any other public comments?
I think just.
Yeah, come on up.
Brian, walking over there. Hi. And I'm Vicky Miller, and I didn't realize Festival was gonna do that, but I want to say that I did do an in-depth interview with Canyon Rock with Wendell and Jonathan Truffy. Can't hear you. If I could come over there. And I want to make it available to you guys. My email is there.
I can't hear you online either, I'm sorry.
My name is Vicky Miller, and I did an in-depth interview with Jonathan and Wendell Trappy of Canyon Rock about the proposed asphalt plant. It's about 16 pages, and I will be scheduling one on tomorrow for next week for Sig Anderman and perhaps another person, and I'm glad for you guys to review that. And if you'd like a copy of what I've done, it's not for publication, but my email is in there signed in. And thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Is there anyone, Tracy?
I'm not seeing any hands raised online.
We're gonna move to county update, and since Supervisor Hopkins is not here, I believe Debbie is gonna do an update on the district stuff.
Yeah, and really, main thing I just wanted to share is that last weekend or March 2nd, that was 2 weekends ago, we opened the Guerneville office. A lot of you were there. We're excited to be there. We're trying to be out there on a regular basis, but we're meeting with constituents by appointment. So if you're working with somebody in our office, you can reach directly out to them to schedule an appointment. If not, you can email District 5 at sonoma-county.org to set up a time. And we just love to meet with people. We're also working on converting the vault into a conference space. And we're looking forward to having more an easy place for community members to come together and meet. So that'll be really exciting. Department of Health Services is there now, providing some behavioral health services. And our hope is that once Human Services Department moves in, they'll be providing CalFresh services, EBT services, and be a hub for more community supports. So that will be coming shortly after a roof repair is complete on the building. And then I also just wanted to ask council members here about a few events coming up that the communications committee has identified. And I think most of these events were the MAC participated in them last year, but we have 4 events coming up in May and June that we don't yet have anybody signed up to table at. So if anybody, I'll read through when they are and what they are. And if anybody wants to volunteer, I'll add you into that form. If you need to mark it down and check your calendar, then you can just email me and I'll add you to the form. So we have the Guerneville School Health and Wellness Fair, and that's coming up on May 4th, and it's from 1 to 4 p.m. And if there's just a general consensus that I should register the MAC for a table there, I can go ahead and do that without anybody. So I'll go ahead and confirm a table. River to Coast Children's Services.
Was that the one where we were at together last year?
No, I was not at
The
that
health
one.
fair? Who was there?
I was there.
You were there.
Were you at Patty was there?
Is this the same mile event?
No, it's the Health and Wellness Fair.
It was the same day?
It's
Cinco de
Day
Mayo?
before.
It is May 4th this year.
I don't think it was one that we found was very lucrative.
Yeah.
I remember that too, that
Yeah.
we didn't get a lot of attention. Yeah.
Okay, that's,
It's a kids event and parents were busy, might say.
The River to Coast one,
No,
the Guerneville Wellness Fair.
correct.
So should I not register you?
I think not.
I think there were some things last year that the committee did not think were worthwhile.
Yeah, we've made a list.
Yeah.
Okay. And then May 14th is the River to Coast Children's Services from
That's
6 to
Ty,
8 p.m.
that's Ty and I.
You're already on that,
Yes.
okay. Guerneville Night Market, May 17th from 5 to 9. And we're registered for that already.
And I'll do that.
I'll do that.
Okay.
And I'll join in when I can. I'll be down.
They'll pop by.
I will. Oh, so,
You'll
you know,
make it
well,
camera with your.
I gotta work and, you know. I mean.
And then
May
the,
17th.
May 17th. Just because we're signing up doesn't mean others can't join.
right,
Yeah, we can tag team, because we can't all be disabled to start.
and then, June 7th, Forestville Farmers Market.
That's me.
I'll be there.
And ties.
And I do want to add the Renito homeowners barbecue.
Yeah.
We usually have like 1,000 people there.
What's the date?
I'll have to look.
Okay, send it to me, I'll add it to the calendar. And if anybody knows of events that would be good for tabling, you can email them to me, I'll add them to the list and just make sure that people know about them.
What about the Greenville Farmers Market?
The night market?
No, farmers.
Okay, oh, so what is, do you have?
That's,
we didn't
find it. Mike, that's another one that we found not very
Okay.
lucrative.
Right.
We're not interested.
I would be willing to,
Sure.
if it moves to the plaza,
Right,
I think it'd
which
be
we've
more
been
fun.
talking about. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it moves to the plaza, it'd be much better.
Okay,
So that's all I have.
okay. No other news? No other updates?
No other.
Nothing earth shattering?
Don't poke their pet.
Okay. Any questions from the council, anything that Debbie just talked about?
Well, I will point out that Debbie actually signed us up for all 4 night markets coming up this year.
Yeah, through the rest of the year, right?
That's
great.
What are the dates of all 4 markets?
I didn't print them, because I just wanted to schedule you into June,
Understood.
but I can send you the
Appreciate that.
whole calendar.
Yeah, and that was really good. That was a great event.
Yes, it was.
Any other council questions or comments on what's good at this time? Public, Vesta.
Is the Forestville Youth Park Parade and Barbecue too far reaching in terms of having an information table? Or is that appropriate since many people from West County attend the Youth Park Barbecue and Parade?
I went last year and,
You had a table?
no,
Okay,
we couldn't get a table. Couldn't get a space for a table.
yeah, it has to be done pretty far in advance.
It does.
So I was wondering if it's something that the communications committee would be interested in. It's-
I'm doing it,
Oh, you're
so,
doing it?
yes.
Okay, cool.
Any other public comments here? Tracy, anyone on Zoom? Or,
I don't see any
online?
hands raised.
Okay, great, thank you. And we're gonna move to renter protections for unincorporated residential tenant. And we have Eric Romero.
We're just
Here, I
gonna-
know.
And we're gonna have Eric come up and sit here so he can take
Oh,
notes and also be
okay.
close to the owl.
Hello.
Hi.
Everybody. Thank you for having us. I have some printouts for you. I didn't make point enough, but in the interest of trees, I hope everybody can share. So my name is Eric Romero, and I am a policy analyst in the county administrator's office. And I'm joined by Crystal Pinero, who is the deputy county administrator, and Liz Coleman, who is deputy county counsel, who is joining us via Zoom. And we're here to conduct a listening session. This is not a formal presentation. Any more? It is a listening session to hear community input on renter protections for unincorporated residents in Sonoma County. So this stems from a board item on December 5th, where they heard options to augment renter protections in residential for residential tenants in unincorporated Sonoma County. And before the board makes a decision, they've asked for community engagement to hear from stakeholders across the county. And while the item that they will be hearing on May 21st specifically addresses unincorporated Sonoma County, we'd like to hear opinions just on street. So what are we looking for? We are looking for just your general thoughts on renter protections in Sonoma County or more broadly. We are looking for anyone to share personal experiences as a renter, a landlord, a property owner, a property manager. And we'd like to hear just any comments that you believe the board supervisors should know when you're taking any actions on rental protections in unincorporated Sonoma County. So with that, I'd like to open it up to folks on the council first, and then hopefully folks in the public.
Before we go there, can you maybe go over a little bit about what you guys have in mind so we know?
Yes.
Yes, so Supervisor Hopkins wanted the community to give us their opinions and their feelings on renter protection before delving into the technical aspects of the proposal. But I think County Council Liz Coleman would be better suited to talk about that.
Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Coleman. Would you like me to respond to that request?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as Eric said, we were requested not to get too far into the weeds on what we would want a recommendation to look like, but I can talk in broad strokes about the types of protections that could be in place to augment what is already in existence. So just for a little bit of background, and this is in the board presentation from December as well, there is a fairly robust statewide eviction protection statute that protects renters in many types of buildings who have been in their homes for at least a year. So there are limitations on the state law, some based on the types of reasons that someone might be evicted, and other limitations based on the type of property or type of owner of the building in which the tenants live. So in the context of what is already protected, some of the concepts for ways to augment the protections would be to expand the types of properties that are covered. So in general, single family homes are not covered by many of the tenant protections. That is something the county could address by an ordinance. There are certain types of properties, particularly as it relates to single family and duplex type properties that currently, if they are owned by an individual, are not covered by the tenant protections, even if those same properties would be protected if they were under corporate ownership. So both the types of buildings and the types of ownership are things that could be expanded by the county to protect more tenants. Another option would be to expand protection based on the types of reasons for termination of the tenancy. So as it stands under state law, there are a list of proper bases for evictions. Some of them are considered just cause. These are things like a material violation of a lease term, failure to re-up a lease at the termination of the lease, unauthorized subletting, failure to let a landlord into the property. So there could be additional limitations on the types of a basis that could be allowable. And one of the major ones would be what are called Ellis Act protections. So that would be to create a more robust process that would limit the ways in which a landlord could terminate a tenant who, for purposes of self-occupants. So as it stands, Sonoma County does not have an ordinance that effectuates state law on this point. the state allows counties to protect tenants from eviction where there's going to be an owner occupants after the eviction. And you can't prevent it outright, but you can add notice periods. There can be relocation benefits for tenants if they're asked to leave for those reasons. So those are some of the additional types of protections we're looking at. One of the major holes in the state law as it stands is that one of the proper bases for an eviction is a substantial remodel. And as it stands now, there is no right to reoccupy after a substantial remodel happens. So one of the possibilities would be to create a right for a prior tenant to come back into the property after a remodel is completed. Or if a remodel isn't actually completed in a timely fashion, you could allow the evicted tenants to then reoccupy. So these are most of the core ideas we're talking about: expanding the type of tenancies protected, expanding the types of properties that are covered, and expanding, or rather limiting, the list of reasons why folks can be evicted. One additional idea that's been floated, and this is also covered in the board presentation in December, would be to create a robust protection that would spring into effect at the next time there is an emergency in Sonoma County that could cause tenants to become destabilized. So what the county did during the COVID-19 emergency was to first, it passed a pause on evictions for those who couldn't pay rent. And then state law got ahead of the county's rules and sort of made some changes on how those work. So there was a statewide protection for non-payment evictions. And then the county also put into place a temporary just cause ordinance that said you can only evict people if there is a health and safety reason or certain other reasons that the state had specifically carved out as things we couldn't regulate even in the pandemic. But it was responsive, and it took a while to get into place. So one of the concepts that we're working with is potentially putting together an emergency just cause ordinance that already exists and is already on the books. And then the next time there is a serious emergency that requires the protection of tenants, the board could simply pass a resolution activating that ordinance that was already pre-placed. So that would allow the county to be more nimble and faster the next time there is a major emergency to make sure that tenants are protected. So those are the main ideas that we've been talking about. There are a lot of nuances and a lot of sort of fine points on how each of them would work. And I'd be perfectly happy to describe any of them, at the direction of the council. But as Eric said, we're mostly here to listen and hear what is important to the community. So I'm going to stop speaking and turn it back over to Eric.
Joe.
I have a question. What kind of protection around rate increases or regulations about rate increases exist now, and are they under consideration in this new account?
There are state level rent increase protections that limit to a certain percentage per year. I believe it's the maximum of either 10% or 5% plus the CPI change over the course of the year. So as long as you are covered, much like just cause eviction protections, there are limits on which types of properties and which types of ownerships are covered by the rent control, but there is a state level, cap on the increase. So it is possible for the county to itself go past those levels. One way would be to attach the rent protections at an earlier point in a tenancy. It could create more aggressive rent control limits. At this time, we don't have direction from the board specifically to come back with an ordinance that talks about rent control directly, but it is within the scope of the types of things that we've been asked to hear about the community from.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. My first one is, I know that there's been increase in institutional investors and private equity buying single family homes all across the country. This is a relatively new phenomenon. that I personally disagree with, but it sounds like the state is potentially considering a bill. I just saw it, AB 1333 to ban institutional investors from buying single family homes. I doubt that that would be retroactive, but my concern is that that would be something I would particularly want renter protections on, single family homes owned by institutional investors. I would ideally have the strictest renter protections in my mind to disincentivize that type of ownership. And then my other question is, you said it's possible to change the laws based on the type of ownership, and I'm curious if you can change the laws based on where the owners are, like let's say out of state or out of county. Can you change renter protections based on that?
As to the first comment regarding institutional investors, I'm not sure to what extent it's a question to me. I mean, there are certainly within state law as it exists, higher levels of protection for tenants of institutional property owners than there are for solo owners. And that relates to specifically the just cause protections do attach to some tenants whose landlords are institutional, where they would not attach if it was a single individual or a family ownership. So those are certainly on the table as a possibility and something we can bring back to the board as an area of interest that's being expressed. But I may not have missed what the question to me was on that point. Could you clarify?
You're right. The first one wasn't a question, it was more of a comment about, I believe that type of ownership is extractive of wealth in our location. So I think it's within Sonoma County's interest to disincentivize that type of ownership because it just funnels money out of the county. So I just wanted to make that point.
We will take note of that point. And as to the other question, whether stricter protections for owners that are not local, that is something that we can certainly take back the question of the interest, and I can put some additional thought into. I cannot provide an answer right now as to whether or not that would be violative of the rights of any of the ownership if it was based, solely on where they live. So it is certainly a possibility and worth exploring. But I can't unfortunately say straight up whether that's something that we could or couldn't pass.
Thank you. I was just curious.
And further on that, my question would then involve whether or not there would be a local property manager that would be the intermediary between someone that was out of the area. Would that change the qualification? So I don't know.
I'm hoping that you can kind of walk us through the process. You touched on this, but I didn't catch everything that you said. I know that in some, and I'm thinking more in terms of cities and whatnot, where there's rent control, there is usually or often some sort of provision where you can't evict someone unless you need their apartment for a family member. And some people have alleged that sometimes people get evicted and then what do you know, lo and behold, Uncle Joe decides not to live there after all. And so the apartment is vacant and can be rented then at a higher price because the rent control floor, went away. Is there anything like that being thought about or whatever?
I can speak a bit to how those types of ordinance go into place and how they could potentially work in Sonoma County. So those types of protections are generally called Ellis Act protections. So there is a provision in state law that allows local agencies to adopt protections. So as the state law does allow for termination of a tenancy for an owner occupancy to occur, the state law terms are pretty vague on that. So local governments have authority to pass ordinances. So long as they have a rent control ordinance, they can also pass an ordinance that describes a process by which notice and a certain period must pass before the eviction can occur. The county could, for example, limit re-rentals to new tenants should the family not actually move in. So if someone gets kicked out because a brother is supposed to move in and it never happens, the county could require the rental to be offered back to the tenant who'd been removed at the same term that they had reached before. It's not a protection in state law, but it is an allowable protection that other entities or other local agencies do sometimes do. Some similar protections that have been proposed and adopted by other municipalities and other agencies are things like additional notice periods for seniors or disabled folks to make sure that they have the maximum time they can to find comparable housing, or a passage of a requirement that certain amounts of relocation costs be paid to those folks. And there are terms in state law about that, but the county could do a stronger job than the state law requires. It could pass greater protections. In order for the county to pass an Ellis Act statute, or excuse me, ordinance that puts out those rules, it would also need to adopt a rent control requirement because the way state law is structured, Ellis Act laws are dependent on there being rent control laws. One way that could be accomplished is merely adopting by reference the new state law rent control, or the county could go farther than that and put a more robust rent control situation, or sorry, I'm blanking on the word here, a more robust rent control protection. But just to sort of on that point, as we talk about rent control, there are other statutory limits under state law on how rent control can work, so that it's not a blank slate in terms of what the county could do. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Anyone else on council? Question?
I've got two comments. One is I appreciate the thought around renter protections. As evictions cause homelessness, and I know that there inevitably, if this comes back, will be some opposition to it, and I can understand that from a landlord perspective. However, I would encourage the board to think holistically about this as it affects, again, homelessness and that crisis that we're experiencing in the community. The homeless service system, I can tell you, housed over 700 people last year, which is quite a feat, if you ask me, but they can't keep up with constant inflow. So that consideration. Secondly, I would say renter protections are great. They're well thought out and implemented, but enforcement is another issue. And so it's one thing to implement these policies. It's another thing to have the capacity to enforce them. So keep that in mind as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Anyone else on council? Public, let's try Zoom first. Tracy, is there anyone on Zoom that has their hand raised?
I'm not currently seeing any raised hands. If you'd like to ask a question or contribute to public comment, please raise your hand. No hands.
Okay. We'll go here.
Anybody behind him?
No, it's you.
Okay. The tenant.
Remember the X, remember the X.
So it seems like, okay, so tenant protections is like this. It's a huge umbrella. So what I'm hearing that what you're talking about specifically is evictions and rent control. So could I bring up a different topic? Okay, so say for instance, I live over here in the Sycamore Cottages. You know, what about tenant protections for people who have trailers. Yeah, are there protections, for, what I know is there's not, you can't get renter's insurance, you can't get flood insurance, you can't get any insurance. I mean, if you, like, I own I'm buying a newer trailer, it's 2019. I cannot get renter's insurance on it because it's mobile, can be moved, it's a fifth wheel trailer, it can't be moved. And you can't get flood insurance because they don't do that. The only thing, so there's not, there's not, that's what I know as far as protection, protections in relationship to anything that might be available to another renter. If you live in an apartment or a house or whatever you rent, anything, if it's not a trailer, So.
So you rent the land?
I rent the land, yes, I rent the land, so, that's just an idea about protections. I don't know if I just, nobody can answer, so that's just an idea.
No, yes, you can't.
She's gonna hold responses until the end of public comment.
That's good.
I'm wondering about protections for seniors on very limited low income and parents with children.
Yes.
Are there anything that protects them from being forced to move before they have a new place to move into? In the case of seniors, I've had enough friends who've been told they have to leave and can't find anything affordable. The worst case of a woman who found a room to rent in a rooming house in Santa Rosa, which she rented for 2 years until something opened up in a senior housing. And the senior housing is wonderful, but the waiting lists are 2 to 3 years. So with the time, from the time she had to leave till the time she found a place that was stable that she could afford was 3 years. And she almost became homeless. So like we were saying about the homeless issues, also, when you have small children, it's much more difficult to find a place to live. And I know in my case, I had the same thing where my landlord said, we're selling the house, you gotta go, you have 30 days. And I had a dog, 3 cats, and a 4-year-old. What do you do? Is there any protection for people with children? Because moving children is traumatic enough as it is, but finding a place to rent with small children and with pets is almost impossible. So is there a way to protect at least those most vulnerable categories of humanity? And I don't know if Vicky's, do you feel capable to address the issue that we just dealt with?
I'm gonna try.
You're gonna try? Okay, so I'm gonna leave that one to you because we just dealt with one. Pardon? No, okay, so can I get to your kinks? You're welcome. You're welcome for that.
Stop talking about it.
Okay.
So I uncovered a case recently, somebody I know who was living in Cometa without plumbing for several years, and the owners refused to address the issue. And when I became aware of it, I made some calls to some local social services. He'd been there for 8 years and with no plumbing and paying his rent every month. And the local social services that I contacted, they all had wait lists in terms of helping him. His house was red tagged. He's a senior, he's 77. He's never had a credit card. It was a really difficult case. I contacted 40 different rentals before somebody was able to accommodate him. I had to have some railings for the stairs, and he's been there a couple of weeks. The reason I'm standing here is because we had to pay a tremendous amount of money to get into the place, and I wonder if there is any pot of money available for reimbursement for this person who, has been paying rent. He's contacted legal aid, and he got some help in that regard just recently. But I'm wondering if there's a pot of money available to somebody who was in such a horrendous situation for so long. And that's. Thank you.
So I may have the not so popular opinion. I think what we really need to do is be able to strike a balance between encouraging people to invest in housing so that they can rent it, and kind of balance that then with the problem of, hey, we can't just evict somebody or they need some place to go. And I kind of think back to kind of personally for me, I looked at actually buying a house that would be rental property. And I looked at all the restrictions that are out there and I'm saying, no way I'm going to invest in property because I can't get out of it if I need to. Or I may be restricted to do, if I want to do some kind of remodel, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is I think we need to be careful as we vet out something new to make it so that it encourages local smaller ownerships for individuals, or if I were to do it, I'd probably form an LLC so that I could protect from the liability side, that somehow make it so that it encourages us to go in and not be worried about undue regulation that says I can't go liquid again. I think, when we start talking about the private equity folks who are, multi-billion-dollar companies that are really taking away our real estate, yeah, I would agree that when you start talking about bringing it down to the smaller level, I think we need to be very, very careful of that. Thank you.
Sure.
I think I staged my minutes.
That's pretty good. Anyone else have a question or comment? No? Any board members have any?
I do. And I appreciate your comment because and that was basically what I was going to bring up in my comments. We have to maintain a really careful balance because what happens is if you get too restrictive, the property owner that owns rental property is going to say, that's it, I'm giving up. And they put the property up for sale. The new property owners remove it from the rental market and you created a worse situation because you decrease the amount of rental property available. So it's this balance that we have to really be careful for both the landlords as well as the renters.
I'd like to also speak from I just have a little apartment downstairs. Not been a big problem, but I had a next door neighbor who spent 8 months evicting or trying to legally and kindly evict a tenant for non-payment of rent for 11 months or 8 months. And then there was a guy down the road again who pulled his property off the market for the same reason. It took him 13 months to rid himself of a non-paying tenant. So we have to balance with the landlords as well, especially the mom and pops. People who own one downstairs apartment or one rental home next to theirs or something.
I agree with a lot of the comments we just made too. There has to be a balance between those two things. And I think Ty said this earlier, the enforcement part has to be thought about. Because you can do these regulations all you want, and I don't know if there is a law that says if you don't pay rent for 11 months, that you can't legally evict, right?
So it's also very costly as a landlord to hire a lawyer, which is the best way to do it so that you're doing it properly.
Right.
So you're talking about $1,000 retainer to be right.
But all that stuff has to be.
If you're lucky.
Anyone else on the board or council?
Well, I just have a question. I'm wondering, just some general background, like what our vacancy rate is in the county, in the West County. I know that we've done a lot there's been a lot of building and a lot of proposed building. Now, most of it, I believe, has not come to fruition yet, but like when that does, what's the expectation around how much of this crunch will, if any, will be eased?
Okay, anyone else? thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much.
Were there questions for Liz to follow up on? Should have hold the comments.
Some public comment. There were some questions.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, yeah.
There were a few items in there that were, most of them were comments, but there were a few that were posed as sort of questions about what could be done. So if the board would like me to just speak briefly on those, I'm happy to. And this is just with the caveat that I cannot, of course, give legal advice to individuals about their individual situations. I can say generally, as it relates to trailers, non-permanent structures are regulated differently. Sonoma County does have a mobile home rental stabilization ordinance, and there are specific rules that apply to non-permanent trailers as well. I can't comment on whether there are renter protections for trailers specifically, and what renter insurance, that sort of thing. Those are outside the scope of what I can comment on, unfortunately. Regarding the comment and question about protections for low income folks, particularly seniors and parents with young children, one of the options for consideration that could be brought to the board would be considering longer lead times for terminations that are non-at fault for folks who are in vulnerable populations. Some municipalities require that terminations in order to take a property off the market don't go into effect until the end of the school year for folks who have small children, or for teachers are one of the options that are treated in that way. And as I mentioned previously, that certain municipalities have longer lead times for seniors in general in that particular regard. And one additional note on that is that currently just cause protections do not cover formally designated low-income housing. So one of the additional protections that could be available to economically vulnerable populations would be an augmented protection to cover those as well. They're exempted from the state law, but they could be covered at the local level. And then the final point that seemed like it was a legal question was the issue of enforcement. I just wanted to note there are, to the extent that the county passes limitations on the manner in which evictions may be completed or under what circumstances they are proper, the enforcement mechanism is the courts, because when an eviction starts, then the landlord would effectively have to make their showing to the court that the eviction was allowable and proper, and part of that showing would be alleging sufficient facts to support it. When you talk about other protections, such as, rent restrictions would also be enforceable by the court. Ellis Act evictions, in terms of the noticing period, those are often subject to, those would generally need enforcement mechanisms to be adopted by the county in order for those to go into effect, because they're more procedural in nature rather than threshold legal questions. Those were all the legal questions I heard, but if there was anything else that the council wanted me to respond to, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Anyone?
Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. My contact information is on the back of the material there. Please reach out to me if there's any other comments that anybody wants to share. And of course, we always encourage folks to write the board itself with any recommendations or anything else.
I could just add, Eric, if you want to get preview or additional engagement.
Sure. We will be conducting a few more listening sessions like this across the county. We're also working with a consultant who will be holding focus groups, as well as interview with key stakeholders that will be most impacted.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to community and committee and community project people. I know there was a couple here that were have written reports in the packet itself. If those committees want to comment generally on those, if the board has questions on those, now it's time to do that. Okay. And then anyone else on any of the other ad hocs want to talk about anything from land use to community engagement. Land acknowledgement, we haven't done much on land acknowledgement.
We have a meeting scheduled.
Oh, okay. Et cetera, next time.
Well, I'll talk about the Granville Plaza ad hoc.
Yes.
Those notes were not included in the packet, so I'll review them briefly. That ad hoc is made up of the Granville rep, Spencer, and myself, and Betsy. And we have an advisory, a community advisory member, Matt, who is the president of the Russian River Chamber of Commerce. And we're going to include many other community members in going forward. And the idea is that there is county money, if you had heard, to do some renovation on the plaza to make it more functional. And so we're meeting about that. We're going to determine what's possible, solicit input from the community, including businesses and community organizations, work on solidifying activation of the space, and come up with suggestions to present to MAC and others. We had our first meeting. We feel like it's really necessary to understand from public infrastructure, Johannes, what the county has in mind for the space, because we understand from Jay that there are certain parameters. And so Johannes has been understandably very busy with the weather, but we do have a call scheduled with him on March 20th. One thing what we know is that having activity in the plaza will make it a better place for many reasons. And having a hub of activity there will be attractive for visitors and the community as well. And so one of our first efforts is that Mags is working with the Chamber of Commerce members to gauge interest in individual businesses or groups of business holding events there. I'm going to be reaching out. I made a list of all the community organizations in the Lower Russian River. I'll be reaching out to all of them to gauge their interest. And we're going to talk to the Rotary because they were already doing some things on the plaza.
Yes, and Herman Hernandez actually approached me.
Right.
And is very interested in talking about plaza because he was there. He was part of the group that actually originally designed the plaza.
Correct.
Which interestingly enough was not with public infrastructure, but with transit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And both those agencies are
involved.
Correct.
So
So
I'm sure we'll hear more about that.
Yeah, and Herman is the principal landowner adjacent to the plaza, he owns all the property there. So he really is very, very interested in participating.
And we've told him we will be including him anytime we can.
Good deal.
Just to be clear, ad hocs cannot have community members as members of committees, but we can have them as guests and consultants and advisors. So, so we're speaking, right after we speak with Johannes, we'll schedule our next meeting and I think our next effort is engaging the community in various ways to get more ideas.
Any questions from council?
I just want to mention, Joe, that, our new community stewardship project team, we're always looking for ways to help, especially with beautification and trash collection, all of that. And I think that's got to be some component of what happens in the plaza. And so just let us know what we can do to help.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the one thing I will say is that I feel like we haven't really discussed this in depth, but I feel like it's important to do something in the interim. We have no idea how long that will take. But so to your point, in the interim, there are things that maybe we can do.
Didn't we actually talk about reaching out to the farmers market people and seeing if they'd like to?
Max already said they'd like to.
I actually talked to Johannes about interim stuff, and he's open ideas.
Great.
Joe.
So for you guys out there, if you live in Grenville, especially, and you're interested, keep your eyes open. We'll try to post as broadly as possible so you can be included.
Joe, am I correct? You're just talking about the plaza.
Yes.
Not about the proposed park.
Correct. Those are two separate. The same pool of money.
Yeah, right,
but
but-
two separate projects.
And it's gonna be. Anyone have any questions for Joe on that topic? Anyone out in public? No? Okay,
I'm not seeing hands online.
any other ad hoc want to make a report for the board? Yes, no? No, okay. All right, thank you. So we're on to prospective future agenda items. We have a few on here, care report, which I know we talked a lot about in the last, God, that's how long, a year or so. So that's potential agenda items, which I think is an important one. Fire readiness.
I'd really like to see the care report. I mean, it's an important topic, of course, but it also intersects with so much of what we're talking about in terms of homelessness and crime and, yeah.
Fire readiness, vegetation management, which is always a topic that we want to talk about, so that's up for consideration. And Gurnville public safety as well. And we have, Debbie and I have talked about, is that a MAC agenda item? Is that a separate town hall? How to approach it? So any ideas anyone has on how they, like, public safety stuff, right?
Or fire safety?
No, public safety,
Okay.
which is, well, they're both public safety. But
Yeah.
but on public safety, in particular, open to ideas from anyone on what kind of format they think that would be useful. What I'm honestly struggling with to some degree is I'd like to be able to structure something where we actually can accomplish something. And not just have it be complaining about stuff or throwing out solutions that are not practical or not doable. So I've been wrapping my head around different ways to do that. So if anyone has any ideas, feel free to reach out.
Did you go to the meeting that the sheriff had in Gurnville a few months ago?
I did not.
No, it was here. There was one here and there was one in March. Yeah.
Oh, there was one where he was there, but anyway.
It was just, he was there, Linda was there, county council sometime, the DA, I think. And it was a good forum for people in the audience to interact and ask questions and have responses from the people who are responsible for it. So,
What you can't really do at these meetings
I know.
that well. So
Yes.
that's why I'm looking
Yes.
for.
More
That's
discussion.
something with cameras, so. Okay. That reflects, again, the public safety.
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't.
GMRS radio project.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I would like to share with you that
We'll get to you.
what we found is,
Check out a star.
Oh, no, we're gonna, hold on a sec, we're doing council members and then, but I see your hand raised, so I won't forget.
I have a suggestion for the problem.
Okay.
so, what I suggest is that we have a GMRS presentation to the map. And then each neighborhood then reaches out, such as we've had meetings in Occidental, we had 60 people there on Sunday. The week before, we had 72 people in Cloverdale show up. And we actually do training. We show them the radio, give them the radios. Supervisor Hopkins was generous enough with the public, with a grant to provide free radios to households. So, but you have to have the training so that you qualify for the radio. And we just don't give the radio out and say, here's a radio.
I already have one of those.
We need training. So, the next, the next major hit list, if you will be Rio Nito, because they've got an active homeowners association and Friends of Rio Native Group, so that will be the next target area.
Well, we do as well in Hacienda and some.
That's also on your side of the road. Calvin Sandine is very much engaged with the Hollydale group.
I just want to mention that it's a more complicated topic than I sort of thought when I first heard you talking about it. So I would love to be educated a little bit more.
We'd be more than happy to do a presentation to the MAC and have the chief radio officer is Tony Gugu from who's my alternate from Casadero. And Johannes Hoberts is on the NACS committee, and Calvin Sandine is on the NACS committee. So, and the NACS stands for Neighborhood Auxiliary Communication Service.
And if I could add just a bit, I went to the training that Mike's talking about with a couple of folks from Monte Rio. And, you know, we walked in and just thought, oh gee, you know, I'm not a techie and I have no idea how you do this and whatnot, but by the end of this short training, we got into small groups and a wonderful person came and just walked us through things. So when we came out of it, not that we're experts, et cetera, at this point in time, but yeah, we felt very confident and very, well.
You know how to use, I mean, I don't want to be an expert, I just want to know how it
Well,
works.
bringing out the small groups is the solution.
Yeah, that is the thing to do.
Okay. Anyone else have any, if they have any agenda item suggestions, just make sure to reach out to Debbie and or me on that, and we'll put them on the list of things to think about
Can I
and
just
get the right people.
say really quickly that I would like a town hall on fire readiness? I don't know if that's already happening in Burnville or across Lower River, but it's gonna be probably another record-breaking hot year without India this year, so.
Like a town hall, not a Mac.
I think a full town hall would be appropriate for fire readiness this year, maybe every year, every spring. I think it's something very important.
What we've done in the past is our main meetings
Yes.
has been a fire readiness meeting. And
Yeah.
we could hold it in a large enough venue that people could,
Great, that's fine with me, but just something,
I think we did the last one in Casadero.
that one was in Casadero.
Done two in
And
Casadero.
it was a great presentation.
Yeah, it was.
But we had very little.
And a lot of people.
We had a lot of people from there, but not a lot of people from elsewhere.
Yeah,
Right.
the Guerneville one was not well attended.
People seem to think Casadero is 1,000 miles away.
It is.
part.
But we had one in Monte Rio some years back, and it was very well attended, the whole community center. And really, really good speakers that, you know, spoke to people's needs.
Well, and they also provided a great deal of information about resources.
Yeah.
Available.
Okay.
So we go back to the public safety thing again
Yes.
too. I'm just a little shocked that I've been hearing more and more people talking about how they don't feel safe in town or and the school bus stop being moved elsewhere from the center of town, which, and I think removing activity is not going to enhance public safety. It's like putting more activity in the place is what's going to cause more. So I'm concerned about addressing that dichotomy. Dichotomous.
You're concerned about addressing or concerned about not addressing?
Well, I'm concerned that people need to be heard, but at the same time, removing the public from the public space because we're afraid is not going to make the space safer.
I agree with you.
So I think that discussion needs to take place.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. And with that.
We had
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Let you forget.
What's going on with the public safety?
You come up here. You could come here and I apologize.
Let me stand on the.
I stand with RGS.
I'm Carol with Russian River Keeper.
Hi, Carol.
We know.
Anyway, so about the public safety thing, and that, I know it's an issue, and I know that Guerneville, and maybe it was just in the seasonal months, which is fine, actually provided security. They paid for a security guard to walk around. And so that's, I'm just telling you, that's exactly what we need. Because when that happened, you know, the businesses felt safe. Riverkeeper Park gets trashed. It's just trashed nightly. And we, you know, the sheriffs do walk through and are trying to keep it whatever, but they vandalize it and whatever. And they're vandalizing other properties in this area. So if you just had security at night, like we used to have, that's all I'm proposing, is that can we just get it back?
I've actually asked for some information about that particular thing, and because I've heard two sides to that. Some say it worked, some say it didn't work. I'm just wondering if there's any source of information. I know the county paid for it or funded it.
Well, I love it. The sheriffs had the means to do it, but they don't. And
No,
I
again,
totally understand the burden that they're going through. All I'm saying is that, I know a lot of these business owners and they miss it. All I'm saying is they miss it. They felt more comfortable having that security.
I don't know if the county, because the county funded that.
Yes, it did.
I'm wondering if the county has any report on the effectiveness on that, or where we, oh yeah, that's good, thank you. Where it can be improved or not improved, or something
A
to go
lot
on.
of it has to do with who the guard was.
Right.
Because there was one guard who was sitting in his cabin, and then there were other guards that would walk.
Right. We need a beat
Yeah,
cop.
beat cop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was dropped because. I don't know.
Probably money.
Yeah.
Okay, and, yeah, go ahead.
Public safety.
Yeah.
Okay. You Charlene, and then everything. So I'm not afraid of somebody. Yeah, I'm not afraid of somebody or a dog or a homeless person that I might allow to stay in my house overnight because it's raining. What I'm afraid of, and it has to do with the public safety, is when it rains. Because of a creek. And the thing about the fear around rain is that when this area, when my area floods from a creek, from the Five Creek, nobody warns us. You know, yeah, what is an emergency? You know, the fire department didn't go. The sheriff's department, when they closed off this area here to get everybody out, all the apartments, the cars, nobody came to say anything until after a flood. So, and that is a public safety issue. It is, yeah, we go to warn somebody or to check on the welfare of the extremely vulnerable people. Yeah, the seniors for that. The young mother, or, whoever it is. Yeah, there are vulnerable people in.
And it only floods there.
Huh?
And it usually floods there.
Well, yeah, it made me know.
Yeah.
It wasn't up to me.
Yeah, no, I know, that's, I'm agreeing with you.
Public safety, yes.
Yes.
Wasn't there?
I have a response to that. Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
Oh, I respond to that.
Yes.
So you live in Sycamore Court.
Right.
Okay, and so for years I've been like trying to address the issue of the debris dams on Fife Creek. Because that's what causes the end of Mill Street to flood, that what's caused Armstrong Road to flood and your home. And so this year I was a little floored at the fact that the river's not even close to flooding and you guys have to evacuate, and that's Fife Creek. So what I did was meet with the water district who's responsible for keeping it clear, and they cleared it, just so you know.
Awesome, yeah, and the fourth, February 4th, or no, or this most recent rain, that whole area.
They got equipment in there and they cleared the debris, and so hopefully that'll never happen again.
Hallelujah.
So,
All right, thank you.
Is that enough?
Yeah, thanks.
Got your back.
I just want to encourage a couple of these meetings. I think public safety continues to be an issue, and in my opinion, it's getting worse. And I think that probably the town hall format is the better one for this one, because then you don't have all the restrictions that we have as a MAC council. But I think the more often we get our illustrious sheriff and our DA out here and in front of people saying it ain't working, the more action we're going to get. We need to do squeaky wheel. The other one I'd really like to encourage us on is the whole concept of GMRS. I did go to the Occidental meeting, got my radio there. I know there are others who are interested in it, but they don't understand it. And I know that in particular, Guerneville is woefully inadequate compared to what we're seeing in Occidental. I was on, we'll see what happens on Saturday with the drill, but I mean, I think I was the only one reporting from Guerneville on the last countywide. And it's like, come on, people, we have, you know, there's a lot of people here and we're the ones who lose communication just as bad as everybody else does. We need to get it focused, particularly here at Guerneville.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The people who are feeling unsafe or witnessing unsafe things or whatever, I guess my question is, do you make a report to the police? And the reason well, not everybody does, okay? And the reason I ask is, whatever it was 6 years ago when first started the MAC, I went to the sheriff and was talking about it and all that sort of thing, and they said, gee, nobody makes any reports here. So that's why we're constantly on the verge of having our hours cut and stuff like that, because it looks like we're not needed. And, you know, they pulled stuff up on the computer and you can look at where all the reports have come from, and no, nobody is making any reports. So
people often don't feel safe, but there's no crime to report.
Well, I understand that.
That's more a general feeling of, you know, what it looks like in the plaza.
And it could be hyperbole based and not actual lack of safety.
Yes.
Yeah. It could be just an exaggeration. I don't feel safe, but you're perfectly safe.
So whenever you call the sheriff's department, always ask for a ticket number so that there's a reference.
Yeah.
That's vitally important. If you don't get a ticket number, you have no idea whether or not the item has been entered into the computer.
I would, based on both what these guys, I would like some clarification on call volume to the sheriff in particular. And because we had our quarterly breakfast with the sheriff substation folks. And I got contradictory information from them saying call volume didn't really matter. Right, which is very contrary to everything I've heard in years past. Can we find, I'm sure we can find that out if it does
I think,
affect funding and other things.
I think that information was, sought out by Blue Sky in the, in their research.
They know that our call volume is high. Go back to the governance study, and they have the stats there, and we took a very high percentage of county. So we've got the call.
No, I know we have the number of calls, but according to folks in the department, they say those number of calls don't necessarily correlate to how things are staffed. That's what I thought those things were correlated, and then I was told differently, so I just would like to know what's
I
what.
wrote that down as part of, because really this item isn't to discuss these issues.
No.
This item is to discuss
Future.
what we're going to discuss. So and we're getting some we're getting that information, but we're also kind of spilling out.
I know
But that's,
we're kind of going around, but I honestly
but that's a good point.
have been struggling with this issue and how to get a meeting organized. So please, like, these issues matter. If just send me like lists of questions or whatever, I just want to make sure we can have a great meeting.
Yeah, it'll help us format. What I have so far, just from listening, that a town hall format is the best way to go. We want to bring the sheriff in. We'd like to get data, for example, call volume data, but reach out to me if other people have other materials that they'd like to be provided beforehand so that you can go in prepared.
Yeah, and I also think other county departments that have properties out here, right? That from infrastructure to, park and ride to other places, whoever's responsible for those county pieces of land where there are reports of not good things happening should also be there, because if
Yeah.
their ownership or their stewardship of those pieces of property, maybe they don't know all the issues that, or hear them enough from those out that live out here to actually do something, or not that they're resistant to, but they may not know that they need to, they may not know what the issue is and what a solution might be. So I think it's important that those folks are in attendance as well.
Park and ride, public infrastructure, that's.
Yeah, so.
I have one more.
The school board.
The statistics, is how many of these calls end up with arrests?
So,
Yes, the thing I hear consistently, yeah, I called the sheriff, they came out, they didn't arrest anybody. And they're still on the street, or they did get taken in and they got OR'd within, they never really got poked in the scale. And they just went right back out. That seems to be kind of a consistent pattern that I hear, and I think the statistics there will probably bear that out. But I think, yeah, you've got a good point that if you don't come up with numbers and say, hey, the numbers say this, and we want this because of it, we're not gonna do it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to back you on, but I think it's an important topic. Anyone else have anything? So with that, we are adjourned.